Hey, what's up guys, MugenLord here, and just last week, man, Nintendo Switch 2 had its presentation on a Nintendo Direct, which everybody was anticipating, including myself. Here on this channel, a lot of us have been talking about this. I had made plenty of videos of my speculations, my predictions, and also whether or not that the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be capable of able to compete or at least keep up with the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. And I enjoyed every last bit of that content, including you guys that's getting involved with the discussion. So I appreciate you guys showing that support. So now that we have got a chance to actually see the Direct itself and see what the Nintendo Switch 2 is actually capable of, I walked away quite satisfied. Enjoyed every last bit of the details and the information that was presented to us as far as the hardware is concerned. Now, despite all that, there was quite a few controversial, I guess you would say, premises that was set up here that had the gaming community ablazed. Everybody's been talking about it. I don't care if you was an Xbox fan, a Sony fan, Nintendo fan, it didn't make a difference because everybody was talking about it. And we're going to get into that in this video in terms of what that controversy was, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on that. So before we even dive into the video, make sure you hit the subscribe button, the notification bell for more gaming content here on this channel. So we're going to dive into it. For starters, before we even break down what the controversy is and what was involved with the Nintendo Switch 2 and Nintendo in general, I want to first talk about what I liked about the Nintendo Switch 2 in the presentation altogether. For starters, I believe that the Joy-Cons 2 definitely stood out the most for me. Is because if you guys aren't fully aware, or if you're new here on this channel and don't really know my thoughts about the Joy-Cons here on this channel, I didn't really like the Joy-Cons for the Nintendo Switch in general. I just think that when it comes to the Joy-Cons, I don't like how they feel. They feel very weak. They feel very like toyish like, and it feels like I'm going to break it, which is why I always spent more time with my Pro controller. I think the Pro controller is a lot better in terms of the thumbsticks are concerned, and plus the Joy-Cons have always provided like a lot of drift when it comes to as when you start putting so much emphasis and you put a lot of playtime on it. I mean, the drift has become an issue. Now, luckily, since I don't use my Joy-Cons for the Nintendo Switch 1, I have yet to experience drift, knock on wood, because I always use the Pro controller. So that's why this never really get any use at all. And plus, I'm not really a handheld person, so this is always docked onto my television screen. So I don't really play this handheld wise as well, but I prefer the Pro controller. But when it comes to Nintendo Switch 2, you know, from the looks of it, it looks a bit more sturdier, and from some of the gameplay that I've seen that journalists and many content creators that got their hands on, it looks a bit more durable than what it appears to be. And also on top of that, it has its halo effect, so this is also to eliminate that Joy-Con drift, which a lot of people had issues with. So it really have drawn me in. And then the fact is that we also have mouse controls. Now, I know for me, I probably won't be using it, but I know there's a lot of people out there who love to play their first-person shooters or their shooters in general and would love to take advantage of that technology. And the fact is how it's so seamless, especially when you look at the gameplay for Metroid Prime 4, you can go from Joy-Cons, you know, with motion controls, and then you can switch instantly to the mouse controls. So that's something that many people may be considering to get into when it comes to their shooters. Now, for me, it doesn't really look that comfortable because of how thin the Joy-Cons actually are to want to use it as a mouse. And they also promise that you'll be able to use mouse controls on your lap as well, so you wouldn't need a flat, sturdy surface to be able to enjoy those controls, especially if you don't have anything around to be able to lay the Joy-Con down like a mouse. So I think that's pretty interesting. So that really stood out to me the most when it comes to the Joy-Cons. And then a bigger, better screen display. I think screen display is definitely important. And when you compare it to the Switch 1, which it shows you how much of real estate that the screens have taken up, it's definitely a great look. I know some people don't like the fact that it's not an OLED, but LCD, man, the technology did come a very long way. And to me, it doesn't really make a difference. You know, Nintendo tried to always keep their prices real low, the cost real low, so you can be able to put out a console at a lower price while at the same time being the profits. So you know they're going to sell an OLED version later down the line. So some of you guys maybe even may wait for that anyway. But yes, better controls, better, bigger display, which I think is pretty cool. And then of course, the embracing of video and voice chat. I mean, of course, Nintendo is late to the game. They're always late to the game when it comes to these quality of life or standards when it comes to online gaming. But the fact is that they're embracing it, I think is also awesome. And they're taking it a step farther when it comes to the voice and video chats and everything. Yes, I know that when you start to share your screen, you start to see that horrible frame rate, but you're streaming it. And I think when you stream in multiple games at one time, you're bound to going to get some of that lag. Now, I'm not sure how much the lag is going to be depending on how many, if it has less people that's, that's sharing it. But I still think it's pretty cool because now you better set up gameplays with your friends. And the fact is that you can also do your own type of streaming moments and stuff where you have the game in back of you and you have yourself. So there's a lot of things you can work with when it comes to that. And plus, when you're playing games maybe like Marvel Rivals or any other type of competitive team based games, now you can actually have all your friends and your teammates that you're playing with all at the bottom of your screen, so you can also make out calls and plays with one another. So I think that's going to be pretty cool. Of course, it's going to be some downside to it. It's going to be some toxicity to it that's going to come with it as well. But it comes with the culture of all this. But now, we're going to definitely move on to the other factor when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2 and what it needs to do in order for it to succeed. Now, I already talked about it numerous times on this channel of what I believe that they should do for the Nintendo Switch 2 to be able to compete with the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. And now, after seeing everything and seeing the Direct itself, I would say that it's safe to say that, yes, they are in a good position, in a good spot. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you're new to the channel, I've talked about what the Nintendo Switch 2 needs to do in order to succeed. In order for it to succeed, it has to be competent enough to be able to play third-party games that the previous Switch 1 was not able to play. So whatever games that the Series X and the PS5 has, the Nintendo Switch 2 needs to be able to play those games, or a good portion of those games. It needs to play a good amount of those games in order for it to keep up. Third-party support is very essential for the Nintendo Switch 2, or Nintendo in general. They need that third-party support. And the fact is that the Nintendo Switch 1 already had a great install base, and now they're moving over to the Nintendo Switch 2. They're able to keep the momentum, because if you look at the Direct, they showed their third-party partnerships, and there's a shit ton of games to be excited for as far as ports are concerned, especially games like Elden Ring. Elden Ring is definitely a must to have on here. There's rumors of that we're going to get Doom: The Dark Ages that's going to come to the platform, and hopefully maybe even Grand Theft Auto 6. But to show where the Nintendo Switch 2 stands in terms of horsepower, we already see developers in articles saying that they're happy that the Nintendo Switch 2 has the horsepower, and there's some signifiers to show that this is a pretty competent piece of hardware they have here, especially for it to be a hybrid. And what do I mean by that? Well, look at Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate had made it onto the platform, and it's coming to the Nintendo Switch 2. So that is something to be able to show where that console stands in terms of what type of third party or kind of third party that they're able to get. And then on top of that, we have CD Projekt Red with their announcement with Cyberpunk 2077, and they're going with the full 64GB cartridge. So that means all of the game is on the cartridge, and they're already showing comparisons of what these games look like from the PlayStation, the Xbox, and even Sony, and now the Nintendo Switch 2 when it comes to Cyberpunk 2077. And the fact is that now gamers are able to experience that, and there was already talk that the game kind of like struggled on the Steam Deck, and this one is actually performing a bit better than the Steam Deck on the Nintendo Switch 2. That's also a good sign that, hey, this is a pretty competent handheld hybrid game console in general, and it definitely need to do that. And then on top of that, first party is definitely important. Now, we know when it comes to Nintendo that it takes time for them to release their first party. And the good thing about it is Nintendo has set the trend is when they announce their first parties, normally you have to wait, 3 to maybe 6 months for the release, which that's really close, opposed to waiting a year or maybe 2 to 3 years for the game to release. I mean, they did drop the ball with Metroid Prime 4, but that that was a different situation for the fact is that they brought the development back in-house with Retro Studios. But besides the fact is that their first party is very important. And the thing is, they got Mario Kart. Mario Kart is their seller that's going to sell consoles. Mario Kart is such a big deal. And I'm gonna show you my ignorance. I like Mario Kart, but I didn't know Mario Kart was that much of a big deal. I mean, I bought every last Mario Kart, but I didn't see Mario Kart like a big deal, like a game that sells consoles. I never seen it that way. It was just a game, a fun party game that you buy the game and you play with your friends, you play with your families, and then you go about your business. I didn't know it was that much of a big deal. But yes, Mario Kart World is going to sell this console. Now, many people say, well, it's not really a lot of first party for the Nintendo Switch 2 and everything, this, that, and the third. Well, you have to understand, when it came to the first Nintendo Switch, all they had was Breath of the Wild. And look what they had done. It sold the Nintendo Switch because they had the third party lineup, and then they had Breath of the Wild. So Nintendo Switch is going to be perfectly fine because not only that we got Mario Kart World, we also got the next month in July, because you got to remember, Nintendo Switch 2 released June 5th, a day before my brother Keo's birthday. Next month after that, which is July, I believe July 17th, we also going to be getting a Donkey Kong Bonanza. And Donkey Kong Bonanza caught me off guard. It caught me by surprise. If you've seen the direct, you've seen like how I figured it out once I seen the characters and stuff. But this game is going to be a beautiful, surprising game. I was surprised that it wasn't going to be a Mario platformer, but then again, I mean, we got Luigi Mansion before we got Sunshine on Nintendo GameCube, but the fact is that we got this Donkey Kong platformer that's going to be the highlight platform first party game that's not Mario, that's going to sell the console. And I think that's something else that people are going to look forward to after getting Mario Kart, knowing that next month follows Donkey Kong. And we want to talk more about this in other videos to break it down, but these are the things that I believe is actually going to put Nintendo in a great spot before we get into the controversy. And then of course we also have Metroid Prime 4, something that fans were anticipating. I believe that we had got a teaser, which was a logo back in 2017, and then we heard nothing else about Metroid Prime 4 at all. But yes, Metroid Prime 4 is right around the corner, and everyone, including myself, is looking forward to give it a try. And plus, as I said before, you can use the mouse controls. Visually, it looks appealing. But the thing that really showed that Nintendo Switch 2 is nothing to underestimate is the fact that you're able to play it in 4K, 60 frames per second. That's in quality mode. You're getting 4K 60 frames per second. And then on top of that, if you just want to play in performance, because if you're a performance junkie like myself, then you got 1080p 120 frames per second. Either choice, you're going to come out on top as far as the performance and frame rate that you're looking for, and then on top of that, the quality. So that's going to be awesome. And I was surprised that they came out punching with that. I thought that there was going to be some sacrifice, that was going to get frame rate, but visuals maybe just a little bit of a step down. But no, you have those options, you have those choices, which shows that this console is actually capable, which is actually pretty cool and got me excited even more. Now, it's time to address the elephant in the room. And what is that? Well, the controversy. Yes, even though people like myself was excited about the Nintendo Switch 2 and its performance, the horsepower, the third-party support, the first-party titles, and everything, there was something that was mentioned that really had me scratching my head and many other people debating and having a really like a spit about. And what is that? Well, the pricing. Well, people have issues with the pricing of the console and then the pricing of the games. Now, the Nintendo Switch 2 is priced at $450. I don't really have an issue with that. It's because the Nintendo Switch 1, when that came out, that was kind of like in a weird position because they had to cancel the Wii U and they had to put out the Nintendo Switch in mid-generation of the Xbox One and then the PS4. But now if we look at the consoles like the PS5 is around $500, I believe, and the Xbox Series X. I have both consoles. It's been a minute since I bought one. Since I've looked at the price at launch and stuff. And now that we in this current generation of consoles, $450 seems about right in my personal opinion. So as far as the console is concerned, I don't see an issue with the price of the console. Now, it's time to talk about the game pricing of these games. Now, I said this before. You can go back and I gotta own myself because I was not expecting this. I'm gonna disrespect myself in a second. I said that Nintendo will be the very last company to really push the digital gaming era, you know, and will be the last console that really will still hold on to physical games, and also still will be that console when it comes to pricing. They'll be the last to jump on board when it comes to increasing their pricing and stuff. And boy, was I wrong about that. I was not expecting Nintendo to really push emphasis on the prices. Now we starting to know that the Nintendo Switch 2, their games and most of their standard prices for these games are going to be $80. Now, a lot of people I wouldn't say spreading misinformation, but I would say that many people were saying that games are going to be $90, but that was only for UK prices. So it was half correct when it came to that. It was just depending on what region that you're from. But the standard is now going to be $80, and people are not liking that. And we said this before numerous of times. Many people thought that it was going to be Grand Theft Auto and Rock going to be the one that's going to start that trend. And a lot of the gaming industry, game developers, was hoping for this to happen. But instead, it's now Nintendo that's going to do it. Now, people said that the writing was on the wall anyway for those who were paying attention, because you had games like Tears of the Kingdom that was actually $70. And we're going to get more into that in a second. But a lot of people was upset at the pricing, to the point that you have the Treehouse, when they was presenting these games in, you know, in their glory, showing off the gameplay to a lot of these third-party and first-party games. People were flooding the chat when it came to the Treehouse to say, hey, lower the prices of these damn games. And to add more insult or confusion to injury, for the fact is that now Nintendo came up with this wonky type of system when it comes to their cartridges. Now you have your Nintendo Switch 2 games, which you have the cartridge itself. The game is on the cartridge. And then you also have this thing called key cards. Key cards is essentially where there's no game on the cartridge. It's just a blank, but it has like a permission or a right to be able to play this game. So it's essentially a physical cartridge of a digital game. There's no game on it. It's just a physical format version of it. So once you buy this cartridge or whatever, once you pop it in, you need to have an online connection for Nintendo or whatever the company is to acknowledge that you have the rights to these games. And then you have another type of cartridge. You have a Nintendo Switch 2 edition, meaning that there are Nintendo Switch 1 games who are getting Nintendo Switch 2 upgrades. So, games like Kirby, The Forgotten Land, and Zelda Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom, and many other games that's going to get these upgrades. Now you have a Nintendo Switch 2 edition cartridge, which means it's a Nintendo Switch 1 game into a Nintendo Switch 2 cartridge, but it's still Nintendo Switch 1 game. It just comes with the upgrade patch with a code to be able to upgrade that Switch 1 game to a Switch 2 version of the game, all in one cartridge. So, does it sound confusing? Well, to some people it does. For a perfect example, I have Kirby, the Forgotten Lands, and I have Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, and of course I have Breath of the Wild as well. But I have these two games. One, I had this game at launch, never opened it. And then I bought this game at launch and only played like 2 hours of it and then sat it down. Wasn't really feeling Tears of the Kingdom. But besides the fact, so these two games are Nintendo Switch 1s. So they have Nintendo Switch 2 editions, meaning that these two games individually will be on a Nintendo Switch 2 cartridge, but it also comes with a key code to upgrade it. So, for instance, I don't have to buy that cartridge. All I have to do, since I already own these games, I have to buy the upgraded patch to upgrade it to Nintendo Switch 2 version. So, all that cartridge does is it puts the patch and the game itself on the cartridge, and then it has the upgrade there, opposed of me having this game and then just popping the game in and then buying it. So just combine it all into a cartridge, which I just think that was just unnecessary. But I think it's for those who didn't initially bought these original games on the Switch 1 and just want to flat out buy the patch and everything and have it on one cartridge. I don't know, but that's where the problem comes in, is because now you have developers that's going to take advantage of this, because Bravely Default from Square Enix is a 3DS game, and they're using key cards. They're using key cards for a 3DS game, meaning that you don't have the game, you don't own the game, And what is the purpose of that when it's a 3DS game? You should be able to fit that game onto a cartridge. So it's all going to matter when it comes to the third-party developers, how they're going to be able to take advantage of this, which isn't really good for the consumers because of the fact is that they're really trying to push emphasis on, one, the high prices, and then two, that you don't own anything. So the biggest thing that is really causing people in an uproar is the fact is that the Nintendo Switch 2 has been delayed as far as pre-orders are concerned. Now the release date is still the 5th, but Nintendo had made an announcement that there's going to be a delay in the US for pre-orders because they're not sure of how the tariff war that Trump has imposed is going to affect distribution and everything like that. Now, in my personal opinion, and many of you guys who follow me on X had the same opinion, was saying that no, this is actually damage control. Because there's a lot of people that are saying that the current price before this announcement was concerned for this delay, people were saying that the current prices for these Nintendo Switch 2 games was because of tariffs, the console itself and the games, and I found that as a load of crap. For the simple fact is if that was the case or whatever, if tariffs had something to do with the price of the $450 and the $80 games that Nintendo was imposing on us, if that was the case, then how come the PlayStation 5 versions of games haven't increased in price to $80? If tariffs have something to do with that. So explain that. I'm talking about new games that's coming out for the PS5. Why isn't those games $80? Or why haven't the price of the base PS5 increased in price if it had anything to do with tariffs before this delay that Nintendo is now making when it comes to the US? So I always knew that was bullshit to begin with. So now when you look at what's going on, Nintendo is pretty much saying to everybody that, hey, we don't know what this is going to be like as far as tariffs are concerned. Now, I also found this a load of crap too, and many of you guys do as well. I believe, in my personal opinion, that they did not expect, especially there's an article saying that Nintendo did not expect this nightmare PR to be a problem. I think Nintendo did not expect the backlash that they were receiving in terms of the prices of these games and the cartridge models that they have set up when it comes to Nintendo Switch 2 cartridges, when it comes to Nintendo Switch 2 edition cartridges, and then when it comes to the key card moments here. I think they was not expecting to get so much pushback. Now they're delaying it, in my personal opinion, trying to figure out how they're going to be able to move forward, because this can definitely hurt them in terms of trying to capture the Western market. Like I said, the Western market is a gold mine for Eastern developers, and as far as hardware and also software is concerned. So now that I think they're trying to recoup, and going back to the drawing board and trying to figure out what's going on, kind of similar to what the Xbox One did when it came to the DRM policy. I believe that Sony and the PS4 was going to do the exact same thing when it came to the DRM always online, but after what they saw with the Xbox One and the backlash that they had received and how they hurt them, had it hurt them, I believe that Sony went back to the drawing board and said, you know what, cancel it, let's not go down that direction. And that pretty much put Sony in favor for that previous generation when it came to the PS4, and had hurt the Xbox dramatically when it came to that. And I think that may be the case that's going on here. I think they're pumping the brakes, sitting back, and people are saying that, will this increase the price? Now, I could be wrong with this. It'll be quite funny if they don't increase the price of the Nintendo Switch and decide to do some price changes with the games itself. Then that would definitely let you know what their intentions was to begin with. But we have to wait and see. I could possibly be wrong on this whole entire situation, and it could be them actually sitting back and saying, hey, tariffs could be an actual thing. But to me, I think it's just damage control. So this is definitely the controversy that is surrounding the Nintendo Switch 2, and many people are upset about the pricing, and Nintendo wasn't expecting the backlash that it's going to get. And this is going to be quite interesting to see within the coming weeks of how Nintendo's going to approach this. By the time you see this video, there could be more information and news that could make this video kind of like obsolete. We don't know. You have to wait and see. But I definitely want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. And I also want you to stay tuned on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on my stream in my podcast, where I'm going to have Cassie from the Cult Cage community, and I'm gonna also have my boy Leon from World of Paradise, or Words of Paradise, to come on to the stream, and we're gonna have a discussion about this whole entire situation when it comes to Nintendo Switch 2 and Nintendo and these tariffs and all kinds of things that's surrounding this whole controversy. So I definitely need your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think about this video in terms of Nintendo and their presentation with the Nintendo Switch 2? Do you think they have an awesome lineup of first party and also third party? And what games would you love to see down the line for the console? So if you like the video, hit the like button, subscribe button for more gaming content here on this channel. This is MugenLord signing off. I'll see you game fiends later. Peace out.